Joe Richardson, civil rights attorney at McHugh Law Group, getting into it once again, breaking it down, the law and common sense.
Joe, great to have you here. Let me throw another question in because a lot of people have questions about this. This is a question from P. Smar. Is this all accumulative, or can you see more than one point they are trying to prove? So I think the question is, from the cross-examination of Mia, is it just, oh, she can't be believed, or are they using this to build a more general defense? Maybe it strikes at the credibility of Cassandra Ventura. Maybe it strikes at the heart of the prosecution's case and how they're bringing these charges. I think they're very selective and very strategic in what they're questioning Mia about, and maybe it goes to a larger point of their defense. What do you think?
Yeah, probably so. Good to be with you, Jesse, and everyone else. Hello, happy Monday. Yeah, I mean, you're not trying to undermine Mia and leave leave everyone else intact. Leave the other witnesses where things really started to get going last week, as it pertains to really demonstrating some things that look like crimes, and leave them intact. You want to cast doubt over this entire thing, including the notion that perhaps, to the point that's been made, you know, criminal conspiracy, racketeering, we know that he's a woman beater, etc. But maybe this is a little bit of a square peg in a round hole. Maybe this isn't a criminal enterprise at all, particularly when, just like with everyone else, you've got Mia saying things that are very positive about P. Diddy. You got Mia saying things that are positive about him once she's not working for him anymore. Wait, is he still influencing her? Or was it possibly true, the positive things that she had to say? So, yeah, I think you're taking a knack at the whole situation here. So as to say, here are a lot of people that were voluntarily in situations that weren't ideal, and they don't amount to a criminal conspiracy.
If they're questioning each witness's credibility, why don't they answer why would all the witnesses lie? They do not get anything personally from a federal case, so why would 15 plus people lie? You know, Joe, that's a good question, right? If we were in the Karen Reed lunchtime hour, the defense would say, oh, because you had this whole network of people who were covering up their involvement in the crime. Of course, they're all going to lie to protect each other. It does become a question. Maybe the jury would have to say, every one of these alleged victims and you know, the witnesses and the assistants, they're all lying because they all hate Sean Combs. They all want money. Is it not believable? Is it not digestible for the jury?
I would say this: nobody wants this kind of attention. No, nobody wants the mark of their existence to be that they testified in the Diddy trial in a situation where this is somebody that at one point you were scared of. But it does kind of remind each and every one of us the whole idea that they're charging him with a conspiracy, but charging no co-conspirators at all. And theoretically, any of these people, depending on the position that they were in, could have theoretically been a co-conspirator because they helped move the criminal enterprise along. So I would not be shocked if there were not discussions that, you know, were perhaps veiled threats or direct threats. Hey, we're trying to figure out who we're going to prosecute, and based on X, Y, or Z, you could be somebody that's prosecuted as well. However, why don't you just let us know what's what, agree to testify, and that will never be a problem. So that's a real question. Sometimes people say, oh, is that a fair question? Doesn't matter if it's a fair question. Is it a real question? Is it a real question that somebody would stand back and say, why would all of these people testify against this guy under these particular circumstances? And you have to deal with that because, among other things, the jury might be thinking about it. The jury's thinking about the motivation, right? You know, I believe Capricorn Clark, she didn't sue for sexual assault, even though she was accused of, hey, you really like Diddy, didn't you, or whatever else. But there was a lawsuit for something else. There was a lawsuit related to the employment issues. So you're thinking about a lot of the WHY as to each of these people testifying, because you're going to use that to butt that up against credibility to see whether or not their credibility passes metal in light of what may have motivated them to be there. So a jury's going to deal with it, and I think that's why it's a good question from anybody else.
Will the government ask someone to testify if they didn't cooperate with them? It's an interesting question, considering we still have that outstanding question of alleged victim number 3, Gina, whether she's going to show up to testify or not. Did a whole sidebar on that one. Everybody can go check it out on YouTube. But what do you think? Will the government ask somebody to testify if they didn't cooperate with them?
I think it would be very hard in that, if you need somebody to testify, you need them to testify, and therefore you call them as a hostile witness. But I think you'd also be concerned about what they would say, assuming that they couldn't take the fifth, right? Because it's somebody that could be potentially prosecuted or whatever. You're going to draw more bees with honey. And even if these people aren't crazy about the fact that this whole thing is going on, I think they do have a sense as it pertains to their witnesses for what they'll testify to and how they'll build their case based on that. If you fundamentally know that you have a witness that is, quote, recalcitrant or is not going to testify, does not want to testify, does not want to be there, and would testify potentially against your interest, somebody that didn't want to be there to the next level, they have to be very concerned about that, because they would only call them if they absolutely positively needed them and couldn't prove their case without them, because ultimately they might end up losing more than they gained by putting them on.
There is apparently this video of Mia where she's wishing Combs a happy birthday. It's being used into evidence. I talked about it with Elizabeth, that it was first, there was an objection to it coming into evidence, came out into evidence. It looks like it's circulating on social media. I've seen a video of it. If this is really her, I see her face. How is it allowed that this would be circulated, Joe? Because again, this courtroom sketches, her face is blurred. I mean, if we want to put them up, we can do it. She's using a pseudonym. I think there's an issue about this. Is there any way that the media would be allowed, or any outlets would be allowed, to show this? If it is a piece of evidence, but to show the unredacted version of it where you see her face and not a blurred out version of her face, I'm not sure I quite understand how that would be possible, Joe.
Well, theoretically, her face is not supposed to be released. This is one part of this is why she's under a pseudonym and everything else, that she's supposed to be protected. That being said, once the cat's out of the bag, the cat's out of the bag. So it's a separate question as to whether or not it ought to be happening versus the notion that it actually is, right? So once it's out there and this is her face, it's speculated to be her face, maybe it is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I can do everything that I want to do to try to undo that, but how do you unring a bell, right? So there is a question as to how this got out, right? And that's something that they're going to have to deal with, but that's separate to the notion that it got out. This is not, you're talking about public and public opinion and et cetera. The judge doesn't get to tell the public, all 200 million of you, just act like you never saw it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like the judge can tell the 12 jurors, hey, disregard the comment that was just made. Disregard this or that and the other. They just said her real name, whatever it is it might be. So you can't really unring a bell. And so maybe it shouldn't be out there. And presumably it wasn't supposed to be out there. But that being said, somehow, if we have it right, what we see is what we think we see, then it did get out there. And now, she has to deal with it from that standpoint. Doesn't necessarily affect anything going on within the four walls of the court, unless, of course, she somehow feels her safety is more endangered, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because it's out there, if she's heard something about that. But I don't even know that that's necessarily in her space right now.
In court, Mia says, I don't remember each specific meeting, but I definitely didn't raise it in the first meeting, again, regarding her allegations of sexual abuse. The judge says, just ask her if her recollection is refreshed. Mia says no, not to the specifics. And then we have a poll up. Should the 2013 birthday video showing Mia praising Combs have been allowed as courtroom evidence? Yes, 43% gives context to the relationship. 57% no, irrelevant to the abuse claims. Very, very interesting. Also, further update from court. Brian Steele asks Mia, you never mentioned sexual abuse until you hired lawyer Sean Crowley. I have no idea when I first mentioned it, except that it was after I had representation. You intend to sue Mr. Combs for compensation. You want money? Mia says no. Joe, that raises an interesting point. When Cassandra Ventura took the stand and she was questioned about her lawsuit, I was of the opinion, I don't think that really goes against her credibility, because she had filed the lawsuit and settled with Sean Combs and then cooperated with the government. Like, what would she have to gain by cooperating with the government now if she didn't have this ongoing lawsuit? And they can make the argument, oh, a guilty verdict would definitely help you. She already had her suit. Why would she cooperate with the government, put her testimony at play, have to share these details with a jury in a courtroom and for the world at large? But when you deal with this and you deal with Mia and potential, financial motivations, is it different? Is it different, Joe?
Yeah, that is an interesting question, right? To your point, Cassie could have been great going off into the sunset and going and living her life because she got her case settled within 24 hours after filing the case, and so therefore, to your point, her case is over. She doesn't have a case to bolster, or to make better by her testimony. On the other hand, Mia, someone else, that would testify that there was sexual assault may be better off. Now, that being said, the other side to it is that when you consider the standards of proof, Puffy could get off in this case. Diddy could get off in this case because he has to be proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt, but still be very much on the dole as it pertains to many of these 80 or so civil cases because it just needs to be more likely than not. I mean, if I'm stepping back and I'm just talking about the potential for sexual assault, that's a little bit more likely, just like domestic violence, which we already know is there, as opposed to him running a criminal enterprise. So I think the answer to that, and being a racketeer, the answer to that notion is that, okay, you're better off for proving this case. Yeah, for sure. But, she's not a whole lot worse off if the case isn't proven, because the nature of the beast is so different in civil court versus criminal court. So I don't know that she puts herself through that for just this reason, because in all likelihood, if she has a case, it doesn't necessarily go away just because they don't convict him here.
Joe, is it possible that witnesses could be called to testify to substantiate how Diddy's relationship with Kim Porter potentially mirrored what happened with Cassie and other victims?
I guess theoretically so. The first thing that I would say, though, is amongst the parties, they should already know who's being called to testify, unless you need to call someone as a rebuttal witness, right? The second thing is that, condolences to Kim Porter, but I don't know that you really want to focus on someone that's no longer here. Because, I don't know that any of it has come through in the trial, but there's been this whole larger conspiracy thing that, Kim Porter has died and Andre Harrell has died and all these other people around Diddy have died, and Al B. Sure almost died. So I don't know that that's on anybody's mind and that it's coming into evidence at all, but I don't think that she adds enough really talking about, and it has to come in some other way. It wouldn't come in from her anyway, in order for them. Just too many questions and too much, disconnectivity and maybe even negativity, so that the prosecution, I don't think that they're better off by making a presentation that goes through Kim Porter at all, that goes through someone that's not here, because you can control how someone is here. And in a worst case scenario, maybe it even makes people a little bit sympathetic that the love of his life is not around anymore.
Do you think he knew all along that what he was doing could be criminally charged, and so he purposely made sure Cassie paid for all of the escorts so he could keep his hands clean?
I don't know that Diddy thought very hard about saying, well, here are the things that I'll do. I'll have Cassie pay for this. I'll have this thing happen and that thing happen, so it couldn't be alleged to be a criminal enterprise. I think he's pretty surprised he ended up getting prosecuted, because among other things, the last time he was prosecuted, it wasn't successful, even though there's an argument that it could have been or would have been. And in any event, it wasn't on RICO. 10 years ago, they weren't prosecuting music guys on RICO, as far as I can remember. And so I think he's surprised on some level. I think that there is some level of invincibility, which is why some of the things that were done relatively in the open. And he thought he could, get to hotel managers and get to assistants and people to keep things from getting out. So I don't think that he looked to and around the corner and said, I will do thing X, Y, or Z to keep from having a racketeering charge brought against me, because among other things, I think he believed it was his town. New York loved him. People loved him. He knew everybody from the president on down. And so I think this has got to be a surprise to him on some level, or in any event, he did not believe that anything would happen to him criminally that he could not handle.
He got the key to the city. But not even that. I think that he legitimately believed he was going to make bail. I think that's why he surrendered himself to New York. I think he was shocked he didn't make bail. And if he had made bail, I think this case would have been pushed years down the road. He would have tried every which way, house arrest, Because one of the reasons I think he rushed to trial is because he doesn't want to spend one more minute behind bars. What other films do you work on? Mia said, Dope, Lawless, Undefeated. You enjoyed the projects? Yes. And you called The People a second family? We all called it that. Combs says, you thought Mr. Combs was a genius at the time. You wanted to continue to work with Mr. Combs, right? I wanted to continue following my dream. What do you think the jury is taking away from that back and forth, Joe?
There's a question. I mean, the defense is really hammering on her that there's just entirely too much of a love fest going on, including after she's not working with him anymore. And this lends to that, right? She was apparently despondent, threatening to kill herself once she heard that the film company was going to be broken down, if I remember correctly. And so is she really somebody that's just, you could imagine a little bit of someone that's being victimized or some amount of someone being victimized, still kind of being in denial about, looking at the bright side of particular things or whatever else. But she goes out of her way so much, calling these people family, going out of her way, doing over and above, and then put that together with the fact that the first time she talks with with the prosecutors, et cetera, that the sexual assault doesn't come up. You want to mix all this up if you are on cross, Brian, what he's doing, mix us all up and really just taint her credibility entirely. Like, how is it that this person has so many positive things to say about Diddy, more so than they would? I mean, this isn't even explained by the psychologist, testimony before. Like, this person is going absolutely, totally overboard and using more and more examples. But of course, maybe to the point that that was made even earlier as I was coming in, there's some such thing as doing too much of that too, and beating a dead horse. And so they've got to, on their cross, examine, and look at and calibrate on how much of this really proves the point for the jury and minimizing her credibility, and then move on.
Questions. Could the amount of deaths that have happened around Diddy, Big, Pac, Kim, could that be brought into this case?
I think it's hard to bring it into the case, other than what you've heard about Kim Porter and going through another window in terms of trying to demonstrate Cassie's jealousy, et cetera. No, but it shouldn't come in. I think that would be entirely way too prejudicial. There's no proof that all of these other people that are outside of the case that he's helping kill, or he's making sure that they don't stay around, or that maybe he, fulfilled a promise, fulfilled a threat, et cetera. I just think that that's going to be a bridge too far, and that would never have been allowed, even if it was attempted.